Hello, hello. Thanks for joining. We're just going to wait for there's Isaiah. And thank you for coming to Monday Meals. Oh, these people joining us. Hey, what's up,
Hey,
Isaiah?
I almost said good morning, but good afternoon.
Well, just a minute ago it was morning technically.
Yep.
Well, welcome to Monday Meals,
Thank you.
everybody. My name is Liz Huck. I'm the Executive Director for Oakland Rising. And welcome to Isaiah Toney, who is the Director of Programs. Is that right? At eBay's?
Deputy Director of Campaigns.
Campaigns. Thank you.
Yes.
Director of something. Sorry.
It's all good.
Well, thank you for joining us today, though, because East Bay Alliance for Sustainable Economy is part of Oakland United, and there's stuff you all didn't know, I'm sure, because there's so many things happening in this city and this county, right? And so probably some of y'all have been tracking a little bit about what's happening with the A's and the Howard Terminal. We haven't seen a lot in the news lately, so I'm sure a lot of folks have been focused on the primary election and all of the other things that are happening here in Oakland. But we invited Isaiah to come on and give us a little bit of an update what's happening. I'm excited to hear about it. I have to admit that I've only very peripherally been watching still. And so hearing about it is going to be really good for me too. But before we get into all of that, the first thing that we do is, this is Monday Meals, and the idea is that we're talking over lunch. So Isaiah and I have shared meals together before, and but this is a new format for everybody else to be able to join in and during their lunch hour. So thank you all for those folks who are joining. So we ask always two questions, Isaiah. The first is, what are you having for lunch? You're eating, right? You better be having lunch.
I know better than to not show up to Monday Meals without my lunch.
What are you having? What are you eating?
I have some delicious chicken noodle soup. My 2 almost 3-year-old Kalila loves chicken soup, so we make a lot of chicken soup.
Oh, Kalila, I miss her. Yay, chicken soup. I love it. That's so nourishing. I'm
Yeah.
having like some cold noodles. I'm having what's called naengmyeon. It's like beef soup, but cold with buckwheat noodles. So good.
I
So
love buckwheat noodles.
it's waiting in the kitchen for me. I was running, to be honest, y'all, I was running between meetings. So didn't get to bring it in front of me. And I didn't want to be slurping on IG Live. So I will definitely be having that right after this. But the other thing that we always ask too, because Monday Meals, lunch is about nourishing ourselves, nourishing our minds, nourishing our bodies. So what are the ways that you do that? Because I don't like to think about like hashtag self-care, like, it's just like a one-off thing. I want to know, what are you doing to nourish yourself, your mind, your body, your spirit, whatever way you want to share.
Yeah, thanks. So I have a really convenient thing to share for this, because on Saturday I got to go to the Malcolm X Jazz
Me
Festival in San Antonio Park
too.
here in Oakland. Yeah.
So good.
And it hasn't happened for a few years because of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So this was the first time I got to bring Kalila to a music festival. And I grew up playing music and grew up going to the Malcolm X Jazz Festival with my family. So it kind of met my needs, both on a like great thing to do with my kid that she loved, as well as kind of like further connecting my family and my life to the community, and to be able to have something like Malcolm X Jazz Festival an East Side Arts Alliance to help organize it throughout my entire life. Is like, that's what I want when I think of community. So it's, I had a great weekend. Just put it that way.
I love it. I know, I was there too. I didn't get to see you all, and
Yeah.
'cause it
Well,
was.
we were late.
I had to run off. We had a bathroom emergency, and I had to take my kids somewhere else. So I missed you all, but it was so beautiful. Just like the music was so amazing, y'all. What I think folks forget is that we did have 2 years of COVID, and then we had 2 years of rain. So Malcolm X Jazz Festival actually didn't
That's right.
happen outside. So, so exciting to be outside. The weather was great. The music was popping. Just everybody's vibe. I just love that. Love that energy. Because just like you, I grew up on Malcolm X Jazz Festival too. This was their 22nd year. So, I was, when it was like, one little stage and like 10 people in the crowd, it was like that in the very, very early days. And so to see it just be at the level that it is, and all the community that came out, and just like all that melanin, there was just so many shades. It was so beautiful. So I was just really happy to be there. So yay, that was something that nourished me too. So I appreciate you bringing that up. So shout out to East Side Arts Alliance for all the work that they do around that. And what I really like too, I just want to say this part, is that they not only talked about that it's not just about arts and culture, but they had booths there that were talking about the San Antonio Park development. They were talking about the Oakland General Plan. So it is not devoid of politics in terms of like and power building and community engagement, because those are ways that we can like bring people in to talk about all of those things, but at the same time like really enjoy it in a way that makes sense for our people, right? With music, culture, sound, and just energy, this positive energy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thanks for sharing that. What a great memory. Now I'm like all bathing in that beautifulness. Tell me what's going on with Howard Terminal. What's happening?
So there's a lot going on. As I'm sure folks have watched over the past several years, there's pretty consistently been a lot going on. I think we're in a phase that's a little bit more behind the scenes with most of the activity on the project, and kind of folks trying to get on the same page about what the final agreement's going to be. We've seen things like the City Council Environmental Impact Review and their resolution from September 17th. And the term sheet that City Council approved last year as sort of big public, not public events, but like publicly related or publicly facing decisions. And we're looking forward to another kind of phase that's more in public after City Council recess in the fall. But right now, there's lots of folks that are wondering kind of what's going on, because there hasn't been as much in the news here on the Oakland side. So, what we're working on with the Oakland United Coalition is a community benefits package that really makes sure that whatever project the Oakland Athletics build at Howard Terminal ends up being beneficial for our community here in Oakland. So there's lots of different, organizations and individuals and different issues that folks are working on. With the Oakland United Coalition, we focus on three things: jobs, housing, and environmental issues. And right now, I'm spending most of my time on jobs policies. So we're working with folks at the Port of Oakland to design jobs policies that would make sure that workers on the project are treated fairly and are paid well, that those jobs go to folks who need it. So we're looking at things like fair chance hiring policies that forbid employers from discriminating against folks based on their engagement with criminal justice system and especially experiences being incarcerated. We're looking at things around local hire and targeted hire to make sure that it's folks in West Oakland who are closest to the project and who are going to feel the biggest impacts from the project that kind of get first chance at benefiting from jobs at that site. There's a bunch of pieces that are moving. The A's had talked about.
Let me just stop you real quick there, because I just want to make sure everybody really understands what community benefits agreements mean, right? Because I think, folks who are hopping on and the folks who are going to watch this later, right, can really understand what that means. And so oftentimes, when there's projects that the city is bringing to and are going to use public dollars for, like for an E-base played such a big role in the Oakland Army base, for example, right, converting that, that there's a lot of what needs to happen oftentimes is that we have big developers who come in and they just influence everything and don't think about what that impact will have on the city, right? And what's important is that then folks from Oakland be able to benefit also from this. We're often told by the city, like, oh, this is going to benefit you. And then in fact, it actually impacts us really negatively because there's no guarantees for jobs. There's no guarantee that our environment will be taken care of. There's no guarantees that, housing won't be impacted. And, gentrification in Oakland has been so detrimental for us, right? So these are really interesting that really thinking about like what that really means and as a process, right? And so someone put in the chat, most community benefits are paid for by private developers and aren't paying for the community benefits using their money. Instead, want to use the city to use tax revenue to pay for those benefits. And so I think this is what we're fighting for, right? Is for some of that, where is the community benefits coming from and how is that happening? And how much of this is being paid for by the developers and paid for by the city and ostensibly by our tax dollars, right?
Yep.
And so I think that's why organizations like E-base, organizations like coalitions like Oakland United and Chinatown Coalition, that are fighting for those things it's really important for people to know that that's happening because it doesn't like happen because some benevolent person like that the Fisher family is like, John Fisher's like, oh yeah, I'm going to be generous and like give this away. And in fact, we actually have to go and fight for these things. And so this is why it's so important for y'all to know what's happening so that whatever Oakland United or Chinatown Coalition might be working on, that know that's happening in that way. I know that there was a community benefits agreement process through the city, correct?
Yeah, well, I would take one step back and look at the term community benefits agreement. I don't think that it's a like legislated term with a very specific legal definition, right? So sometimes when people say community benefits agreement, they mean a contract, right? A legally binding document that spells out, what benefits to the community the private developer will provide for, will pay for, right?
Right.
Sometimes when people say community benefits agreement, it's a little more loose, right? Sometimes, people say the extra tax revenue from our project is a community benefit. Sometimes people say the additional jobs are a community benefit. And while, we might identify that the community does benefit from more jobs being available or more tax revenue, That's not necessarily what we're looking for.
Mm.
The premise of any development project from a private developer is that they want to make money, right?
That's right.
John Fisher, whose family owns the Gap, is worth almost $3 billion. If he wanted to, just benefit the Oakland community, he would have a different idea than build a $12 billion, project, right?
That's right. Let's keep that. I just want to emphasize that piece because he not only owns the Gap, but they also own KIPP charter schools, right? And so they're all about making money and making money off of Oakland. Like that's just be really clear, really, really clear, you all.
Yeah, so for organizations, trying to fight for the improvement of living conditions for folks, we have to be critical, right? We have to bring an analysis that they see an opportunity to extract value. And when we think about, forcing them to pay $5 above the Oakland living wage as the wage floor for every job on site, that's about making sure that they can't extract extra value by underpaying people. By paying people less than what they need to survive and less than what the value of their labor is. So here in Oakland, right now, the majority of the actual benefits that are being talked about are things like, how to spend the increased tax revenue. There's things like, how are we going to fund workforce development, right? There's things like, if there are environmental mitigations that folks want to see happen above and beyond the environmental impact report, which is about compliance with state law, we're going to have to keep fighting for those. So there's the sort of like dollars in community benefits.
Right.
Then there's things that are not dollars, but do benefit the community. So something like fair chance hiring, right, isn't about dollars necessarily. Like we're not saying that, based on someone's, criminal record that they should be paid more or less. We're saying that, folks shouldn't be excluded. So when it comes to things like jobs policies, and I think some of the local contracting policies that folks in the Chinatown Coalition are fighting for.
Right.
There's the dollars question and the not dollars policy question.
Right, right. I appreciate you bringing that up because I think that gives a clearer picture about what people are actually fighting for, right? And so, and you all are trying to codify it by putting it into policy that is put on paper. And these agreements can happen because oftentimes I hear that folks don't want to get behind CBAs or community benefits agreements because they're not binding. And what does that really mean? And so I wonder what does it really look like in terms of the kind of community involvement to build that power up against that, right? To ensure that the CBA is being upheld and what kind of organizing does it look like for us to have, right? But you were starting to get into earlier about some more specifics about those policies. So you started on the fair chance hiring and other things. What else are you all trying to put into this? Because you're more specifically talking about the jobs, right?
Yeah, jobs is I think the kind of most active on a week-to-week basis conversation that at least I'm closest to. There are similar conversations around affordable housing.
That's right.
That are moving, and like I mentioned, there's local contracting policy that folks are also working on.
Right, right. So what are some of the things in terms of the hiring and the jobs that you're really working on fighting for?
Yeah, so in I believe it's 2016, folks in the Revive Oakland Coalition established a policy through the port for a set of jobs policies. that we refer to as the center point jobs policies. And we're essentially saying that we want to see those policies adapted to the Howard Terminal site. The center point policies are more designed around warehouses at the Port of Oakland. Howard Terminal is not a typical port kind of development. We got to hear from the A's about how mixed use they want this development to be. The stadium is $1 billion out of $12 billion. So it's $11 billion, 11/12 of non-stadium development. So that's offices, restaurants, retail,
Parks,
it could be meeting space,
right.
Parks. Yeah. They've talked about wanting to have a premier kind of music venue on site, right? Or nightclubs or something. And those are different jobs than warehouse jobs. So we want to see, the previous policy, which we thought was pretty strong as a national model, adapted to the project that's being envisioned for Howard Terminal. So we've got a memo that spells out 8 different items that focuses on ensuring that jobs at Howard Terminal will benefit Oaklanders and benefit Oakland. Would you like me to mention exactly what all of those are?
Well, I want to hear about that. I mean, because I'm kind of a nerd. I like to nerd out on stuff like that because I think those are really important. That it's a little bit more transparent for everybody to see. But then also, I'm kind of nerdy like that. I want to know about those things.
For sure. So I pulled them up. And I'll give you the short version that we've given to city staff and port staff and other allies and the A's and folks. And then I'll start out by saying that this memo, which we released earlier this year, is based off of the steering committee recommendations that came out of the process you mentioned earlier, Liz, where the city, recruited a couple dozen, like a fairly big group of folks to talk through just about everything they could think to talk through on Howard Terminal. So these items come from the jobs recommendations that came out of that steering committee. So they've been around for a while and they just kind of reflect our priorities for the Oakland United Coalition. So the first one here is targeted hiring. The Centerpoint policy has a tiering process where if an employer has a local hire requirement that they're not forbidden from hiring people from other places, there's a tiered system where they have to try to hire from folks who live in the area before they move on to the next area. And so we want one of those targeted hire zip codes to get swapped. The old policy includes a zip code that's at Temescal in the hills, and we want to swap for a Deep East Oakland zip code that has a much higher percentage of people of color and Black residents, as well as a lower median income. Then we've got fair chance hiring. I think I mentioned that we want to see the all jobs at Howard Terminal be available to folks who are formerly incarcerated. So right now, that means changing the Centerpoint policy to only permit background checks where required by law. Right now, there's an exemption about if the employer has it as a national policy, then it's okay. But that means they can have bad national policies, and we're not trying to let that fly. Next up, Oakland living wage. So right now in Oakland, our living wage is $15.30 with benefits, but that's only about a quarter above the minimum wage. So we're pushing to make sure that the wage floor for every job on site is $5 in addition to Oakland's living wage. So that comes out to about $20.30 an hour with benefits. Then limits on temp work is the next item. So we want to have a 40% cap on temp hires, so that employers would be, strongly encouraged to hire people to permanent jobs. Some of these jobs can't necessarily be full-time if it's like concessions at games that don't happen often enough to make 40 hours every week. But we want to see temporary employees be made full employees after 120 days.
And this is something that aren't the unions involved in that part?
So unions, there are a number of unions who are involved with the project. And yes, they've all been clear that this is something that they want to see in the jobs policies for Howard Terminal.
Got it. So, okay, so we have, so far we have targeted hiring, I'm writing y'all, fair chance hiring, living wage, Oakland living wage, and then temp limits. So that's 4.
Yep.
4.
And
there's
then,
4 more, right?
There's 4 more, that's right. Yeah. So there's broad application of policies, which is we want to make sure that fair chance hiring and living wage apply to every single job on the site without exemptions.
So do you mean, and I have a clarifying question, and you're not just talking about in the stadium, you're talking about the entire project. So all the jobs that have to do with the parks, have to do with the open space, the venue spaces, like the mixed use buildings, right? And develop that. You're talking about all of that across the board.
Yep.
Got it.
Yep. It's a lot of jobs.
A lot.
At the end of the day, it's a lot of jobs. Yeah.
A lot of jobs.
So the next item on our list is funding for workforce development. There in other kind of agreements that the port has about projects, there's a mechanism for building up some money for construction workforce development in the Port Social Justice Fund. We want to see a fund specifically for operations jobs. At the beginning of the project, there's construction, right? Stuff's getting built. As construction hours of work get done, money will build up for construction workforce development. So for operations workforce development, we want to see the A's contribute $5 million of a private contribution. And that goes to make sure that, when the A's try to recruit a tenant to come in and operate their business on the Howard Development Project, that there's, for example, the West Oakland Jobs Resource Center that can work with the employer to make sure that they're identifying potential applicants, hosting job fairs, helping folks get ready to apply for jobs and make sure that, employers can't claim that there's nobody to hire and then try to hire people from outside of Oakland.
Got it. Because then they could probably, what you were saying earlier in terms of like the tiered process for hiring, right? They might just do like a half-assed job about it. And then, and so this is sort of a way to mitigate that and like give that balance to it.
Yeah. And I mean, in our minds, it's also like attractive for potential tenants, right? Like if the owner of a building that I'm trying to move my business into can help me hire the new people that I'm going to need to hire, that's a plus, right? Like that's compared to the building next door that doesn't have that, that's more valuable to me. So we're really interested in seeing the A's make that $5 million private commitment. I don't think that they have made other pledges with private money in that way.
Yeah.
So
And $5
we're
million
working on that.
dollars really is not that much.
Out of 12 billion, no,
It's a drop. And like just thinking about like the hundreds of billions of dollars that they make a year, within their family or with the A's themselves as a corporation, like, right? Well, it's like, what's 5 million?
yeah, it's like $5 million through the 66-year life of the project is like less than a tiny rounding error on the tax revenue, right?
Right.
It's it doesn't mean much to the folks that have the billions, but it means a lot to the rest of us.
Yeah. And I'm curious about that too, right? Because I mean, I wonder, I don't want to like go into the total weeds of it, but like landing on that number as a 5 million feels like, like a small portion of like probably what the community could really need. And in terms of that workforce development. And just so like folks know, like workforce development, like what, just to reiterate, like what Isaiah was saying, is that there is a lot of, like there's job fairs, and then there's assistance in finding the jobs. There's a recruitment, but there's also trainings that, are involved with getting folks in the community, because those are very specific types of jobs, right? And we want to ensure that that there is a broader scope of people in the community who may not have had opportunity to experience those jobs, to get that experience through training and opportunity. So, I mean, this is something that I think, and I know we have two more pieces to go through, but I feel like what keeps coming up in my mind is just remembering that there used to be a time when there was this type of investment by corporations, sort of like paternalistic in a lot of ways, right? They used to create like corporate towns. And I know that like and I think that's the idea around some of like the tech campuses, is sort of like to create an environment that you want people to stay in the jobs for a very long time, because the economy is so different that it's like temp work is the thing that everyone moves towards. And so temporary work just creates instability, not only for the worker, but for the business as well. So it sounds right to me.
Yeah, and that's actually something that I think about a lot, of like the shifting responsibility and expense for someone being ready for a job and ready for a career ladder, right? You know, employers used to have, people on staff whose job it was to go do presentations at the high school, right? There used to
That's
be
right.
like, invite them to come on a field trip and look at your facility, your warehouse, right? And we're seeing that responsibility be shifted to public entities. Even our schools, right? Like
Or
our
to the
K-12 system.
individual, right? Because then it's like
Yeah,
it's your fault that you don't have the job skills because you're just not good enough or smart enough, or you're not working hard enough. So you get this lot in life because you didn't work hard enough.
yeah. So I'm a little bit of like a science fiction nerd, right? So I know I've read stories about like, a few generations ago, the way that a person became the chief scientist in a lab
Right.
was by starting with not a whole lot of skills, right?
That's right.
And you worked at the most entry level job, and they
That's
trained
right.
you, and you got better and better and better and better, and you
That's
were
right.
an employee getting paid, right?
That's right.
Saving for your retirement this entire time.
Right.
Now, instead of you getting paid to learn, you have to go to school,
Right.
right? So you pay tuition to learn stuff that your parents' generation got paid to learn on the job,
Right.
right? So yeah, workforce development is like a more recent intervention into the problem of employers not taking the responsibility for making sure that their jobs are doable by workers.
Right.
So it feels like an important piece to us to make sure that the A's are are actually putting in this $5 million. It's our $5 million is our estimate for half of what's going to be generated on the construction workforce development side. And it's going to be very important to making sure that Oaklanders who need those jobs get those jobs.
Right. And I think that's the other part about it, right? Is like, that's one of the ways that we can mitigate, that we can slow down or stop even displacement and pushing out of and gentrification, is to make sure that people are able to stay in Oakland and work in Oakland, right? And that people don't have to leave, go far away. And it just makes sense. It just makes sense to me that, businesses want to keep their workers close by. Not to be like, I need you on call anytime, but more like that the travel time it takes to like get to work can impact your ability to work well, right? And so having a community and creating a community that invests in there, you want to be able to have good relationship with the community, and it makes sense to me that that would be the investment that you're making. It also makes sense to me why the Fisher family wouldn't want to do that or want to invest in that, given that they are also, through the gap, had done a lot to, take jobs overseas, pay, sweatshop labor level wages, right? And not have any accountability to workers in that sense. And so the idea around it, I can see it being very foreign to them and their idea around like what community really looks like. And again, going back to, at the end of the day, they are trying to make a profit. But so just to reiterate, we have targeted hiring, fair chance hiring, Oakland living wage, limits on temp workers, broad application of policy, funding for workforce job development. That gives us two more. What's the last two?
So one is fair scheduling. We want to see a fair scheduling policy similar to the Emeryville Fair Work Week ordinance, which prohibits employers from last-minute schedule changes or requires a predictability pay for last-minute changes, so that if your boss does call you up and say, hey, I know on the schedule last week it said you weren't working tomorrow, but I need you to work tomorrow, you should get paid double if you bend your own life to meet the employer's needs.
That makes sense to me. That makes a lot of sense to me, because that's such a to not know. And I think that's one of the things that make people in Korea, they call it like precarious workers, because they're put in a precarious situation because they're on call at any moment. They don't know where to get childcare. And then that's a way for them to go, well, see, that's why they were unreliable. And they put it again back on the individual. Like you can't make this happen. You really don't want to work hard. So you're just a lazy bum. And so, right. And then they kind of feed into that. But the truth is that a precarious scheduling like that leaves you in a position like I have to find transportation, right? I have to find childcare. I might have to change like doctor's appointments, like there's all kinds of things that are needed and necessary to be able to live your life and know that you're going to show up for work.
Yeah. It's and you're totally right. Precarity is the model that our economy is shifting towards for workers. I would bet that somewhere there's an employer that doesn't want to pay people enough to live nearby, but is willing to pay the transportation costs for them to live further away. Right. But that the cost for the employer for the extra transportation cost is more than it would cost to pay the employee to live closer, right?
Yeah.
Because employers have decided that they do want workers' lives to be unstable.
Right.
Because, if you spend 2 or 3 hours a day on the bus and on the train to get to work, that's 2 or 3 hours a day you're not organizing with your coworkers.
That's right.
That's right. And so yeah, it's I think it's important for workers to kind of see what's at stake in bad jobs policies.
That's right. What's the last one?
The last one is oversight and compliance. So, we want to see these policies actually followed. So the city of Oakland has a community jobs oversight commission that was set up to work with or to oversee policies at the Oakland Army base. And we want to see that structure, which already has a process for reports to get sent from the employers. It already has a process for identifying fines if people are out of compliance. We want to see that working commission sort of take on this new oversight role with Howard Terminal.
I see. I appreciate that. And then there's probably an investment that needs to happen in that, because that will, thinking about the number of jobs and thinking about what that would look like and all the employers that would be involved in that. I think that a lot of folks, again, I just want to emphasize, right? And you've said it several times, Isaiah, is that like, it isn't that just beyond building this space. It is like the long-term investment in Oakland. And I think you were saying, the next 40 years, right? Because construction could take 5 to 10 let's be honest and real, right? And then, on top of that, then we're talking about, the actual jobs that are coming into that space and what that would mean. I just want to address something that was said in here. One of the questions that the real Gabby J put is, have they agreed to this? And I wonder who the they is, and then like what the agreements have been. And then if not, like what ways that people can get involved.
So there's a few theys in this case. There's multiple. I just want
to say, I love the pause and the breath that you took with that.
It's, this project in particular is genuinely more complicated than other stuff that I think we're used to, even with major developments.
Yeah.
Partly because this is waterfront property, partly because it's on port lands. So, there's government agencies I never heard of that have to give approval for this project, right?
What is that?
Yeah. So for these things that I just talked through, the operations jobs policies, the Port Commission will have the sort of last final legal say when they approve the lease. The lease to the Oakland Athletics to develop the project. That vote will take place for the lease after City Council passes their development agreement, and then the A's also need to agree to it. The development agreement is kind of works similar to a proposal from them as a developer. So, if they're not going to agree to something on jobs policies, then, I would think they wouldn't want to see it in the development agreement that City Council will vote on. So the port, through the Port Commission, the City Council of Oakland, and then the Oakland Athletics. So we got to get all three in line on each of these policies.
So now that's a call out to you all, right? Because for folks who really want to see, real good jobs coming to Oakland, ensuring that we're protecting the workers here in Oakland, that we have all of these things that Isaiah went over: targeted hiring, fair chance hiring, Oakland living wage, limits on temporary workers, broad application of policy, funding for workforce job development, fair scheduling, oversight and compliance. That all of those things are taken care of, that we're going to need folks to get involved. So what are the ways that people can get involved, Isaiah?
So the absolute easiest way is to sign our petition. I will go and grab the link and drop it in the comments here. We're also inviting folks to come with us and be at Coliseum Bart, in the few hours before A's games to come and talk to A's fans. We've had a pretty great reception with A's fans. They like jobs to be good instead of bad. They like affordable housing. People who live in Oakland and have kids in Oakland want to see their kids playing in clean, safe parks and breathing clean air. So we've been talking to A's fans, and I don't have off the top of my head the next A's game we're going to, but I'm happy to share that. And we'd love to see folks kind of come find us at an A's game and sign our petition there.
Well, I just have one question. I know we're going to close out here, but can you tell me where to send folks to sign that petition and where they could get involved? That would be helpful. And then and there was a question, would workers and Oakland folks have priority to housing at the site? And I believe that is definitely one of the demands that are being made as part of the community benefits agreement around housing, because displacement is such a huge piece of what could potentially happen as a result of this if we don't guarantee that folks in Oakland can stay in Oakland, and that the workers at the Howard Terminal Development Project will be able to live and work there as well, and not worry about losing their housing and not having such a negative impact on our communities. And I think that's what's being said. We're not saying no to this in terms of like the terminal, a Howard Terminal being and the development project going forward, but we're just saying, let's do this fair. Let's do this right by our people here in Oakland. So what's the site that they can go to?
I don't have it off the top of my head. Sorry, we've done mostly on paper signatures.
No worries. So I'm gonna pin this comment so y'all can. Somebody from eBase, your staff, awesome!
Yay.
Look at them putting in the petition.
Thank you, Rakshita.
Yeah, we put it in. I pinned it to the top so you can sign that petition. Show up, go talk to some A's fans, because I think that's also what's getting put out there is this myth that that A's fans only want Howard Terminal and they don't care how we get it. And when you talk to people, that's not actually what they want. They really want it to stay in Oakland. They want this new terminal, but they also don't want to screw anybody over. They're good people. A's fans are good people. I'm an A's fan, so I want good things to happen to Oakland. I don't want this to negatively impact our people. So thank you, Isaiah, for showing up. Thank you for the work and the organizing that eBase does and Oakland United does. And shout out to Chinatown Coalition as well, because they're working hard on the EJ, the environmental justice and the housing piece. And to all the folks that are doing the work in West Oakland and all the people that this could potentially impact. I also just want to big shout out to Oakland Rising. So if you all want to check us out, go follow us on all our social media, follow eBase, workingeastbay.org. That's also most of their handles on social media. And then we're having, for the first time in 2 years, having our Oakland Progressives Party on June 23rd at the Black Cultural Zone. So please check it out. Go to oaklandrising.org and click on the necessary links so that you can sign up and show up. It's going to be such a fun event. We're having the Toney Awards. I'm so excited about who we're giving to this year. So please join us that night, because it's going to be fun. And because we want to keep it COVID safe, we need to have you register ahead of time, and we can do all of that. And be sure that we're keeping everybody healthy. So thank you so much, Isaiah, for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Go have your lunch, have your chicken soup. I think you probably need to warm it up.
It'll be okay. It'll taste great.
Yes, I'm sure. So have a great day, everybody. Thanks for showing up.
Absolutely. Bye, folks.